The crystal glasses clinked as Margaret Davidson, my mother-in-law, raised her fourth glass of champagne. A toast, she announced to the gathered family, her voice carrying that familiar, condescending tone, to the Davidson family fortune built by generations of hard work. Her eyes fixed on me. Not that some people would understand that. I took a small sip of water, maintaining my composure as I have for the past 3 years of marriage to her son Thomas. The monthly family dinners at the Davidson mansion had become an exercise in patience, each one featuring some new subtle, or not so subtle, dig at my supposedly humble origins. "Mother," Thomas started, but she waved him off. "Oh, darling, I'm just stating facts. When you married her," she gestured at me with her glass. Everyone wondered what a Davidson heir was doing with a girl from nowhere. What the Davidsons didn't know, what nobody knew except my private banking team, was that I, Elena Chen, was the majority shareholder of Davidson Industries through a series of shell companies and investment vehicles. The family fortune Margaret loved to brag about actually belonged to me. "Tell us again, Margaret," her sister-in-law Susan chimed in, "about how your grandfather built the company from nothing." I suppressed a smile, thinking about the thick file in my office safe that told a very different story. Davidson Industries had indeed been founded by Margaret's grandfather, but he'd lost control of it decades ago through a series of poor decisions and questionable loans. My father, a quiet but brilliant investor, had acquired the majority stake through careful market maneuvers in the 1990s. When he passed away 5 years ago, he left me not just his fortune but also his business acumen and a letter explaining the true ownership of Davidson Industries. "Keep it quiet," he'd advised, "until the right moment." "Elena," Margaret's sharp voice cut through my thoughts, "I noticed you're not drinking champagne. Not good enough for your refined tastes." "Just being careful with expenses," I replied mildly, knowing it would rile her up. As expected, she took the bait. "Expenses? This is Dom Perignon, darling. One bottle costs more than you probably made in a month at that little investment firm where Thomas found you." If she only knew that little firm was one of my family's many companies where I'd worked under an assumed name to learn the business from the ground up. That's where I'd met Thomas, not the spoiled heir his mother imagined, but a genuinely hard-working man who had insisted on making his own way despite his family's supposed wealth. "Speaking of expenses," Margaret continued, swirling her champagne, "Thomas tells me you're still working. Honestly, it's embarrassing. Davidson wives don't work. We have an image to maintain." "I enjoy keeping busy," I said, exchanging a small smile with Thomas. He knew I worked because I loved it, though even he didn't know the full extent of my business empire. "Busy?" Margaret scoffed. "Is that what you call it? We all know why you're working, squirreling away money in case Thomas comes to his senses. Little gold digger's insurance policy." The table fell silent. Even by Margaret's standards, this was brutal. "Mother." Thomas stood up, his face flushed. "That's enough." But Margaret was on a roll, the champagne having loosened her tongue beyond its usual careful cruelty. "Oh, sit down, Thomas. We all think it. This little nobody appears out of nowhere, somehow gets her claws into you, and now she's just waiting to cash in on the Davidson fortune." I thought about the quarterly reports sitting on my desk, showing how Margaret's extravagant lifestyle was slowly bleeding the company dry. The Davidson fortune she loved to brag about was largely smoke and mirrors, propped up by loans and creative accounting. "Actually, Margaret," I said quietly, "I've been meaning to discuss the company's finances with you." She laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the dining room. "You? Discuss finances with me? I'm on the board of Davidson Industries, dear. What could you possibly tell me about our company?" The moment of truth I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. I reached into my purse and pulled out a slim folder. "Well, for starters, I could tell you about the unauthorized loans you've taken out against company assets. Or perhaps you'd like to discuss the offshore accounts where you've been funneling company money." The champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. "What are you talking about?" "The Cayman Islands accounts, Margaret. The ones you thought nobody knew about. Or should we discuss the shell company you created to buy your vacation homes using company funds?" "How dare you!" She slammed the glass down, champagne sloshing onto the imported tablecloth. "Thomas, are you going to let her speak to me this way?" Thomas looked between us, confused. "Elena, what's going on?" I opened the folder and slid some documents across the table. "These are the real financial statements of Davidson Industries. Not the doctored versions you've been showing the board, Margaret. Would you like to explain why there's a $50 million discrepancy? Margaret's face had gone from flushed to pale. Where did you get those? Those are confidential board documents. They're my documents, Margaret, just like this is my company. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's champagne glass slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. What did you say? Davidson Industries. I own it. Or more accurately, my family has owned it since your father lost control of it 30 years ago. We just let the Davidson name stay on for historical reasons. Thomas stared at me, his mouth open. Elena, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner, darling, but I needed to understand who you really were, not who you pretended to be for your family's sake. Margaret stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. You're lying. This is ridiculous. I'm calling security. Your security team reports to me, Margaret. They have for years. Just like your board of directors, your executive team, and every significant shareholder you think supports you. The color drained from her face as the truth began to sink in. All those years of condescension, of treating me like a gold digger, of bragging about the Davidson family fortune, and I'd owned it all along. This is impossible, she whispered. We're the Davidsons. This is our company. I stood up, straightening my jacket. No, Margaret. You're former employees who've been embezzling from my company. And tomorrow morning, the board will be receiving a very interesting packet of documents detailing exactly how much you've stolen. The room erupted into chaos. Margaret lunged for the documents. Thomas tried to calm his mother, and various family members either sat in shocked silence or began hurling accusations at each other. I picked up my purse, ready to deliver the final blow that would set up the next phase of my plan. The Davidsons were about to learn that their carefully constructed world of privilege and pretense was built on nothing but paper, my paper. Oh, and Margaret, I paused at the dining room door. You might want to hold off on redecorating the mansion. You won't be living here much longer. The morning after my revelation at the Davidson family dinner, I arrived at Davidson Industries headquarters earlier than usual. The security team nodded respectfully. They'd always known who really signed their paychecks. By 8 a.m., my private elevator, the one Margaret thought was reserved for Davidson family only, carried me to the top floor executive suite. Margaret burst through the doors at 8:47. Her designer outfit slightly disheveled, last night's mascara still smudged under her eyes. Get out of my office. Your office? I glanced around the spacious room I'd redecorated last month. I don't see your name on the deed. In fact, I don't see the Davidson name on any deeds anymore. She slammed her hands on the desk. This is our company, our legacy. Actually, I opened my laptop. It hasn't been your company since your father lost it 30 years ago. Would you like to see the original transfer documents? Or perhaps we should discuss the $12 million you've embezzled over the past 5 years? The color drained from her face. You can't prove anything. Wrong again. I turned the screen toward her, showing a detailed spreadsheet of her illegal transactions. Every unauthorized loan, every fake vendor payment, every offshore transfer, I have it all. Did you really think nobody would notice you billing the company for your monthly spa treatments as building maintenance? My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. We need to talk. Please. The board meeting starts in an hour, I told Margaret. I suggest you use that time to consider your options carefully. She straightened, attempting to recover her usual aristocratic bearing. Options? Option 1. Resign quietly, repay what you've stolen, and walk away with your reputation relatively intact. Option 2. Face criminal charges for embezzlement. Your choice. You wouldn't dare. I'm Thomas's mother. And I'm the woman you've spent 3 years calling a gold digger. Karma's interesting that way. The board meeting was everything I'd anticipated. One by one, the directors reviewed the evidence of Margaret's financial misconduct. Her face grew paler with each damning slide of my presentation. Mrs. Davidson, the lead director finally said, these allegations are extremely serious. Do you have any response? Before she could speak, the conference room door opened. Thomas walked in, carrying a folder of his own. I have something to add, he said, his voice steady despite his obvious exhaustion. He hadn't come home last night after my revelation at dinner. Margaret brightened. Thomas, tell them this is ridiculous. Tell them what she's doing to our family. Instead, he placed the folder on the table. These are additional records of unauthorized transactions. I found them in my mother's home office last night. Thomas, Margaret gasped. How could you? How could I? He turned to face her. How could you, Mother? I've spent my entire life believing in the Davidson legacy of integrity and hard work. But it was all a lie, wasn't it? There is no Davidson fortune, just money you stole from Elena's company. Our company, Margaret shrieked. She tricked you. She infiltrated our family. I stayed silent, letting Thomas handle this moment. He'd proven himself even more honorable than I'd hoped. No, Mother. Elena didn't trick anyone. She worked hard, earned my respect, and won my love while you were busy spending money that wasn't yours. If anyone should be ashamed, it's us. The Davidsons who've been living on borrowed time and stolen money. The board voted unanimously to remove Margaret from her position and initiate legal proceedings to recover the embezzled funds. As security escorted her out, she turned to make one final threat. I'll tell everyone. I'll expose you. Go ahead, I replied calmly. Tell everyone how you discovered the gold digger you mocked actually owns your company. I'm sure the press will love that story. After the board meeting, Thomas and I finally had our private conversation in what was now officially my office. Why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. Would you have believed me, over your mother's stories about the great Davidson legacy? He was silent for a moment. 3 years ago, probably not, but you could have told me after we married. I needed to know who you really were, Thomas. Not the Davidson heir, not your mother's son, but you. And you proved to be exactly the man I hoped you were. By turning in my own mother? By choosing integrity over family loyalty. By being the kind of man who does the right thing, even when it hurts. 6 months later, the Davidson mansion went up for sale. Margaret had moved in with her sister in Phoenix, her social media presence notably silent about her sudden retirement. The press had field day with the story of the secret owner of Davidson Industries, but their angle wasn't quite what Margaret had hoped for. Unknown Harris exposes family fraud, read one headline. Davidson Empire's true owner reveals years of deception, declared another. The gold digger narrative Margaret had tried to spin fell apart when journalists discovered my family's long history of quiet success. Thomas and I moved into a penthouse downtown, close to the company headquarters. He insisted on keeping his job in middle management, earning his own way despite now knowing about my wealth. I'm not my mother, he said. I don't mean to pretend to be something I'm not. Last week, I received a letter from Margaret, forwarded through her lawyers. You've ruined our family name, she wrote. I hope you're satisfied with your revenge. I filed the letter away with the original documents showing how the Davidsons had lost their company decades ago. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth finally coming to light. Yesterday, Thomas and I hosted our first dinner party in our new home. As we sat down to eat, he raised his glass. To my wife, he said, smiling, who taught me that true wealth isn't about what you have, but about who you are. I thought about Margaret, about her years of condescension and cruelty, about how her obsession with appearing wealthy had ultimately cost her everything. The crystal glasses clinked, but this time, there was no pretense, no false legacy, no stolen fortune behind the sound. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Davidson Industries stock had hit a new high under my leadership. In Phoenix, Margaret probably saw the same alert, another reminder that the fortune she'd bragged about had never really been hers at all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just revealing the truth. It's watching those who underestimated you realize that they never really knew you at all. As for the Davidson family fortune, it turned out the real gold digger wasn't the one serving dinner in her own home. It was the one who'd been stealing from it all along.